Just like, oh, 190 cards in one video. But I kind of had to break this up into a series, so welcome to part 1 of the 190 cards in set 1 of the FNaF TCG. If you didn't know, I made a FNaF TCG. You can learn how to play here. You can keep watching this video where we're going to cover the cards in FNaF 1 and FNaF 2. Now to start off, I'm going to make it clear that the FNaF TCG sort of has two types of archetypes. Let's use the Phantoms, even though they're not in this video, as an example. All the Phantoms have a similar kind of playstyle and concept. They're low cost, they have 0 JP, and they typically die or are a one-off after using their effect. Your normal Freddy could block or attack and keep going. Your Phantoms just kind of expire after they do their thing. However, they all play into their archetypes different ways. Foxy boosts other Foxy's JP. Chica deals effect damage. Freddy gains power. The Puppet stalls for time. There is no Phantom Bonnie. Cry about it. These all play into their archetypal powers and properties, but in themselves, the Freddy archetype has its own set of patterns, and thus Phantom Freddy definitely favors the Freddy deck playstyle, and that's why we're going from game to game and not archetype to archetype. Like, I'm not just going to go all of the Freddys in one video, though I might do that later as like a, hey, here's a starter deck for Freddy and the overview of how to play it. For now, we're going game to game because I designed the cards around like, hey, this is the FNaF 1 set of cards, and they represent that playstyle and concept. For FNaF 1, the core concept was fundamentals. Almost every new game and new card is going to riff on what this set of gimmicks are established here. What is a Freddy Fazbear? Why is Bonnie shaking me down for my lunch money? That was what I had to answer when designing these cards. I decided quickly that Freddy was going to be more or less the card the game was going to be balanced around. Freddy is almost the exact average in every regard. He has the exact standard 2 JP, which for almost every animatronic is the norm, and he costs 60%, which is in the upper mid-range of play costs. Ideally, you want cards to be on the lower range so you can do more in one turn. But 60% is not irrecoverable, especially when he has other cards boosting or lowering that cost. Freddy has a conditional 3 JP that activates whenever you're at 0% during either turn, so if your opponent has 0% or you have 0%, Freddy is boosted. Freddy can be used pretty offensively when he's combined with his staple card Power Outage, which makes it so only your Freddy cards can activate effects, and it sets your power to exactly 0%. However, one of your Freddys becomes unblockable. That means with Freddy, he gets an unblockable 3 JP minimum. Freddy's main once per turn effect is that after he attacks, if you have an animatronic in the left hull, he gains 10% power for you. This is regardless of the 0% condition, by the way. Just anytime he attacks, if there's an animatronic in the left hull, effect goes, he gets 10% for you. Which isn't much, but for considering that he's a card that has no clear downsides other than his somewhat above average play cost, yeah, he can do a solid bit. When you have Toy Freddy reducing said play cost and Mike and Fritz making him aggressive and higher JP, he can be pretty scary and uppercut pretty hard. Did I make an entire character and archetype out of this one meme? Yes, Bonnie is the punching down deck. I really don't like cards that are just shut down effects like, you don't get to use your effects, you don't get to play cards. I hate blue decks in Magic, for example. Or some blue Digimon decks. Blue is a bit different in Digimon. Cards that don't let you play are very annoying and not fun. However, they still do matter for the sake of gameplay, so I had to figure out how do you make a character who represents that kind of concept of disabling your opponent or hitting them back without just making it so your opponent can't play. And what I settled on was, Bonnie doesn't disable any effects or anything. It's not like he prevents your opponent from doing things. Bonnie just is so good at taking down cards and attacking them that even though he's not that strong in a vacuum conceptually, only 2 JP, and that doesn't get buffed unless you have outside cards like Fritz boosting him, he doesn't really have a clear game plan. There's no like, aha, I got the Puppet or Golden Freddy in play and now I'm going to stomach punch you all the way through. Bonnie has the ability to attack active cards. Remember, if you saw the first video, your normal cards can only choose to fight deactivated card or unwillingly be blocked by your opponent's active card. Bonnie always has the choice. If he wants to fight a card in his path, he gets to do it. Keyword in his path, he's not skipping around lanes. Now, normal blocking rules still apply, so if he attacks an active card in the office, a card in front of it can still block, so it's not that silly. But his main power, the thing you're mostly going to be using for him, is that once per turn, for every rabbit card you have, he can place a -1 JP counter on an opponent's animatronic. This can be spread out however you want, so you could put 3 JP counters on one card, or 1 across 3, or like 2 on one on another. It's your choice how you distribute. This gives Bonnie this unique property of being able to take down characters way outside his weight class. Now, he struggles against non-animatronics because a lot of his abilities are designed for animatronics and fighting animatronics. But against those matchups, especially like the Ender deck, for example, which runs a ton of animatronics, he is very hard to work around. The Bonnie strategy is very much, I don't need to win, I just need to make sure you lose. This is actually why he works really well when you mix Foxy and Foxy cards into a deck like half and half, 50-50. I also speculate that working with Chica would also be really good with Bonnie. Speaking of Chica, the normal FNaF 1 Chica just has 2 JP and she heals 1 damage per turn. 30% cost. Now note, heal does not go over the damage line. Remember, it's a tug of war. The damage you take is also health for your opponent in a weird way, if that makes sense. If you play the game, you understand it pretty quickly. That may sound very, very mundane, but this is a fraction of Chica's true power. Just like I don't like shutdown decks that disable your opponent from playing the game, I really don't like mill decks for a very similar reason. The idea of just not having cards and not being able to play things and not even getting a chance to react because you never got the things to react with is ridiculous. So that's why there isn't a mill deck in this game. You can't just force your opponent to discard cards. However, there are a lot of decks that have a consequence or cost where it's like, I discard 1 card from my hand or a few cards from my deck to do something. And because Chica is just so damn immovable and immortal with her playstyle and deck, she can just outlast the opponents and cause a lot of deck outs or use pickles to win games in alternative fashions. Some Chicas, like Phantom Chica and Withered Chica, which we'll get to later, are great at dealing indirect effects damage, which can put a lot of pressure on your opponent and make it so they're struggling to figure out how to get past your line of defense while their health is being whittled away.
And this is to go even further beyond!
Foxy is almost 1-to-1 with how Foxy plays in FNaF 1. Each turn, he adds 1 JP to himself, starting from 0. Now, technically this effect is optional, but you're almost always going to use it unless there's a card like number 1 Crate, who kind of disables the ability to use counters. This effect caps at 4 JP. That's very slow, but it's also a lot in reward, so like you're getting 4 JP, you can hit over even a boosted Freddy. However, we can go much, much further beyond. The entire concept of the Foxy deck type is boosting and boosting and boosting. The Super Saiyan 3 joke is actually the best way to explain it. It is all about stockpiling power for huge payoff. To put that in perspective, I'm going to give you this dream imaginary scenario where your opponent does nothing to stop you and just lets you build out power for Foxy. Fritz Smith from FNaF 2 has the ability to give a card plus 1 JP if it's an animatronic with 2 JP or less. Note this costs 20%, but this is our dream scenario. That 20% cost does not really matter. Since Foxy has 0 JP starting out, if you do not use the once per turn, you can cheat around Fritz's boost and give him 3 artificial JP without ever using Foxy's JP boost. Phantom Foxy adds 2 JP counters to a Foxy you control. Since you can have 3 Phantom Foxys and all stack their effects, our main Foxy will gain another 6 JP. Foxy Go Go Go, a card from FNaF 2, places a plus 1 JP counter on a Foxy you control, though cost 10% for every JP that card already had. Well, in other words, our 9 JP Foxy would cost 90%. However, if we did this earlier, let's say around the time Fritz was adding his counters, this would be significantly lower in cost. Now, already this Foxy has more than enough kill potential, standing at 12 JP, which is more than enough to kill you even at -5 health. But, I mean, he has this once per turn effect, so we can push this even further to 16 JP. A reminder, the strongest base card in the game is Chica's Magic Rainbow with 6 JP. With 3 copies of Adventure Foxy, you have a temporary 19 JP. And just in case your opponent has somehow let you pull off this godforsaken combo, and you have, I don't know, infinite power somehow, or stockpiled this the right way, you can use 3 copies of the card Secret Code 1987, which permanently adds 1 JP to a card, and makes it so until its next attack, it's unblockable if it has 6 JP or more. If you could ever somehow get a Lunatic Maverick 11 JP, which in normal gameplay is ridiculously hard to get to, then using secret code 1987 actually would make it so no matter what, you can swing for game. Got all that? Because it does not matter if you do not kill. Foxy's big downside to just casually building up power is that after he attacks, he removes all JP counters on him, resetting him back to 0 JP. He also removes 2 JP counters whenever he blocks, so he's going to be lowered each time you do that. This was a genuine problem in some stages of the game where Foxy could build up 5 JP and just take hits forever and you would never lose, basically. But your core takeaway from that is, if you're able to do the combos right, Foxy's single hit power is unrivaled. That leaves one big character, like for what the characters you would build a deck around kind of characters. The last one in FNaF 1 is Golden Freddy. Golden Freddy costs 100% power, and you might think, wow, that's a lot. Why would I ever do that? Oh, 5 JP. Well, slam him down. He's Omni. He can go anywhere. Just throw him down and deal with the consequences later. You lollygagging, lily-livered, lackadaisical fool. Golden Freddy is technical on a lot of levels. The main consequence to him is that if he does not attack and successfully deal damage or send another card to salvage, Golden Freddy just bounces himself back to your hand automatically at the end of your turn. So if, let's say you played him while you had 30% and your opponent went to 70%, you did not attack with Golden Freddy. He goes back to your hand. Your opponent just magically gets that 70% with no consequences. This makes the entire game plan of Golden Freddy is playing him while it retains your turn in some fashion. Or at least you do something that makes it so Golden Freddy can attack when he's played. If you pull that off, you have an almighty 5 JP menace who can go in the office or just anywhere. It's worth noting, if at the end of your turn he did not go back to your hand, he reactivates himself, which means even if you attacked, you can also block with him. He is a very tricky card to use and is a very special condition to work towards, but that is such a high payoff if you can do it. That's it for main cards in the FNaF 1 wave of cards. However, there's a lot of other staple cards that are pretty useful here. For example, Jump Scare. It only works if you have an animatronic, but it prevents an opponent's animatronic or human from deactivating until the end of their turn, which means no attacking or blocking or using effects that involve deactivation. It's cheap, it's great for stalling, you can kind of throw it in any deck that runs a lot of animatronics. Backup Generator adds 1 counter to itself at the start of every turn, and then maxes out at 3 counters on itself. Then you can send it to the salvage to gain 10% for every counter on it for a max of 30%. In other words, across 3 turns, you'll build up 30% power. Or you could pop it early for 20% or 10%, whatever. It's a tiny bit slow, but it has a lot of use and is great for Golden Freddy and just general deck play. Almost any deck can run it. The question is it so important that you run 1 of it, 2 of it, 3 of it, 0 of it, because you just need that many cards? Mike Schmidt has a lot of moving parts on it. He sets the standard for what a good security card is. Mike's main thing is that once per turn, he can spend 10% power to place a door on any front row. Doors cannot attack and have 0 JP, but I mean, they're just there to take a hit, you know? However, Mike's other very useful effect is that when you play an animatronic, you can deactivate Mike, which makes him vulnerable, but gains 10% power for you and makes said card aggressive. Phone Guy can also place doors, and his are free, so hey, no 10% cost, but he can only do it in the right hall and left hall. However, he has a passive effect that all tokens you control inflict a debuff on cards that kill them. The debuff being that during your opponent's next turn, they have to pay 10% to reactivate the cards they attacked with. This means if Phone Guy builds up a lot of doors, or you have endos that are creating a lot of tokens, or you have Funtime Freddy with Bonbon creating tokens, it can add up to 10 to 30% power being spent by your opponent that they just lose. It's not game breaking, but it's a neat little thing to slow down your opponent. His main weakness obviously being that he cannot cover the vent. Also, fun bonus, if you want an alternative token to play in place of doors, there's Doroboromon. Before there was even a door token visual in the first place, we used Diaboromon tokens from Digimon to represent doors. So, of course, I had to draw Doroboromon. There are some quick cards in FNaF 1 to cover that are very self-explanatory. Your Fired allows you to kill one of your own security guards to gain 20% power, either as an emergency like, oh, I need to use power, I need to free up a space, huh? There's also 20-20-20, which I have a feeling you could build a deck around, but I'm not quite sure how it would work yet. 420 mode makes it so that when you play an animatronic, it attacks the moment it's played, Endo 1 just pays 10% to place an Endo token. It's sort of like duplication, or kind of like a cheaper, all smaller scale door counterpart. FNaF 2 is just kind of like expanding upon FNaF 1 for the most part. BB and JJ are here. They're hate crimes. Most of the toy animatronics are support cards. They play off the main strategy for their main decks and make that happen better. They're cheap, they're reliable, they aren't the big bosses that deal lethal damage and take down your opponents, they're just helping along the way. But they're definitely essential, trust me. Toy Freddy acts as both defense and support for the Freddy archetype as a whole. Toy Freddy can't at all attack. I mean, he's retired, what do you expect the guy to do? But he has 3 JP, which means he can be an intimidating defense card. If you don't want to defend, however, he can deactivate himself to reduce the play cost of an animatronic or bear by 10%. Or if a card is both a bear and an animatronic, like Classic Freddy, it reduces the cost by 30%. This already reduces normal Freddy down to 30%. He is one of the core backbones of a good Freddy deck and playstyle. Toy Chica is ridiculously simple, much like Classic Chica. She has only 1 JP, but is also only 20%. And she also plays a Cupcake token when she enters play. This Cupcake can go in either the Hall or Vent, and can either soak up 1 hit for you defensively, or heal 1 health. Tuberculosis, Toy Bonnie, was the first card that needed so many nerfs and had to be lowered into the ground because when he was first made, he was a scary bastard. If there is an active card on the map, Toy Bonnie can fight it. If it's deactivated in another row, it's safe from Toy Bonnie's wrath. A boosted Toy Bonnie is truly a force to be reckoned with and is very hard to play around. This is part of why Fritz Smith had to be nerfed and reduced in power in general. His combo with Toy Bonnie is just genuinely that much of an all-star menace in the game. Now, Toy Bonnie does have the huge caveat of not being able to attack players directly, which means he only exists to annoy you, period. Speaking of Fritz Smith, I should explain him a little bit overall. I've already explained how his boost works. Spend 20% to give an animatronic with 2 or less JP, 1 more JP. However, it's worth noting said JP that he adds to cards goes away when Fritz leaves play. That said, Fritz is not going down without a fight. Fritz can redirect an attack to himself as if he had 3 JP. In other words, he can just take down a 3 JP or less card. However, this is a kamikaze. When Fritz uses his redirect effect, he dies, straight up. He used to be able to use this effect without any consequence and could just block with 3 JP over and over again, but this wasn't important to making it so like, there's now a decision with Fritz. You either keep the boosts in play to make your board just that much stronger, or you say, hey, these JP counters aren't as important as me taking this hit. This means you can actually pressure someone using Fritz by knowing, hey, I have lethal damage or something like that happening, and I can attack and only Fritz can redirect it. Now I can force them to get rid of Fritz this way. It also ironically means Toy Bonnie can kill Fritz very, very easily. Oh yeah, and Jeremy Fitzgerald's here. Jeremy can give himself 1 mask counter at a time, and then during your opponent's turn, he can remove it to nullify an animatronic's attack outright. Now, by nullify, I mean he reduces the power of the attack to 0 JP, which means combat with it would still happen. That means Jeremy could reduce an incoming, let's say, Chica's attack to 0, and then you could block with your Freddy to then kill that Chica. You might ask, why is this tied to a counter? Why not just make it so Jeremy can deactivate himself to just reduce an attack or nullify an attack? Mainly because some cards can tamper with counters in play, such as Jeremy Fitzgerald himself, also number 1 crate. Jeremy can, once per turn, spend 10% to remove a counter from a card in play. This makes Jeremy a living, breathing counter to Foxy, Bonnie, and the puppet. Speaking of the puppet, enter the cheese tax. The puppet is played in the free area. At the start of your opponent's turn, they have a choice. Either place a music box counter on the puppet, or pay 10% power. If the puppet ever reaches 5 music box counters, it enters play. Now, why would you want to do this? Because the puppet is a 5 JP unblockable necromancy wizard. Now, getting that 5 JP is rather difficult, especially with Jeremy existing. That's why my grandfather's clock exists. It just adds 1 music box counter to the puppet. In fact, a lot of the other puppet support cards are dedicated to adding music box counters to it. This makes Puppet a lot like Golden Freddy, a win condition card, something you build to install for to try and get working. Moving on from the puppet, we have the Withereds, which are the complete opposites of the toys. They are the win condition cards in many regards for their deck. They're riskier, and they're higher cost in more ways than one, but they are definitely worth it. Withered Freddy is sort of like an alternative outlet for all the power you generate in a Freddy deck other than Golden Freddy. Once per turn, Withered Freddy can pay 10% for each bear you control and buff himself for 1 JP for each. That means with a full board, you can get like a 7 JP Freddy if you're really looking for it. Combined with power outage to make him unblockable, he could be pretty damn lethal in practice. Withered Foxy is more of like a side grade or like technical upgrade. He also boosts himself by 1 JP per turn and is hard capped at 2 JP, unlike normal Foxy's 4. However, he already has 2 JP starting out. This means he builds to his higher level quicker, and when he attacks and resets his JP, it isn't as far of a downgrade. He still is a normal card after that. However, his once per turn effect is tied to discarding a card from your hand. Obviously, this means if you cannot discard a card, this effect doesn't do anything. It also means you have just 1 less card in your hand in general. However, this effect is free if you have a full front row. Withered Chica. Now, the exact cost to her main effect is kind of in question right now. I might nerf her, I might keep it the same. The gist is you discard 1 card from either your hand or deck. I haven't really decided which fully because she might need to discard from hand. It's that good. She just does 1 damage outright via effect damage. There's no blocking that. She just does it. And she also has the Defender keyword, which allows her to redirect attacks to herself, sort of like Fritz does. It makes her in practice a very much anti-Toy Bonnie. 1 damage might not sound like much, but trust me, it's 1 daunting damage in practice. Withered Bonnie is a scary boy! See, in the very first early pre-beta phases of the game, Bonnie had the ability to attack any card on the map. And I'm not talking Toy Bonnie's effect, it was even stronger than that. It was any card on the map. At this time, Withered Bonnie had a very different effect than you would have in the proper beta release you can play now, but this effect was so strong with normal Bonnie that I decided to take it away from him and pass it on to Withered Bonnie in a way. Now note, he doesn't literally just attack anything right now. He just attacks anything with a minus JP counter on it. And he himself can place a minus JP counter on any animatronic in play by discarding a card from your hand. This allows him to not only weaken anything, but then right after, punch it in the gut and remove it from play. In practice, this makes it so like if Toy Bonnie has like a sniper rifle, if that's our flavor for how he does his stuff, the only consequence to Toy Bonnie and Withered Bonnie in combination with each other is that they are both event cards, which means they take up the same space, which means you can't have both in play at the same time normally. Keyword normally, because there's a card I neglected to mention in the FNaF 1 set. A weird-ass meme Scott had made in the early days of FNaF, which was that Bonnie could defy the laws of physics. Hence the card, Defy the Laws of Physics. Defy the Laws of Physics allows you to move 1 Bonnie from one side of the map to another point on the same side of the map. I know it's confusingly worded, but what it means is you can move one of your Bonnies to another space you have, or you can move one of your opponent's Bonnies to another space they have. It just means you can shuffle around what cards your opponent controls in a weird way, or your own cards if you want to free up a space, like with Withered and Toy Bonnie. This means when you have the 3 original Bonnies in a row with each other, normal Bonnie can for free just nerf your opponent's entire board, and then Withered Bonnie can start taking names and kicking heads in, and Toy Bonnie can just pull out his gun and blast away. The Withereds also can actually attack or block twice by using the card Reactivated, which, get this, reactivates them. However, they temporarily lose JP when you use this card. Fun fact, you can actually swap around the toys and withers by using the card Something Borrow Something New, which allows you to discard a withered card from your hand to play a toy card for 40% off its price. For the main 3 toys, that's actually playing them free. You can reverse this effect with Scrap, which allows you to kill off a toy to play a matching animatronic with the same design from your salvage for free. So in other words, you could kill Toy Freddy to play any Freddy or Bear animatronic. Though, keyword animatronic. It can't be, like, for example, you can't kill Toy Freddy to summon Golden Freddy, and you can't kill Mangle for Zangle. This card also has a niche secondary property where it acts as removal, so you could kill an opponent's toy animatronic to play a withered animatronic from your salvaged, though it costs a little bit more when you do that. It also allows you to draw 1 card because, I mean, this card was so situational I had to buff it in some way. Speaking of Mangle, by the way, Mangle is one of the other cards I use to power scale the entire game. Mangle is like this Swiss Army knife who can do almost anything and work in a variety of decks. Mangle is treated as a toy animatronic, an amalgam, and a fun time for the sake of effects. Mangle also can be played in any front row space, which gives her a ton of versatility, and his once per turn effect is that he can gain 10% and 1 JP if a Fox, Amalgam, or Animatronic on your side of the field is sent to the salvage. Like I said, Swiss Army Knife. Mangle can do anything and is this jack of all trades. Speaking of playing cards, if Mangle is the jack, these guys are the Joker. The question mark archetype. You could also just nickname them Misfits. The Paper Pals are pretty basic filler as cards go. They go in any spot you have for free, and they block a hit for you. When they die, both players draw one and discard one. It really doesn't do anything other than just soak up one extra hit or delay things for a turn. The best feature of them is that they don't cost anything. RWQ, on the other hand, is this little goofy goober who generates a lot of power for you by using spirits and children in your salvage. For every 2 of them, he gains 10% once per turn. Given the fact that he does have 1 JP and obviously can block as an office card, it makes him actually pretty tricky. It makes it so he can do some funky stuff sometimes. And Shadow Freddy, for every 4 cards in your salvage, he gains 1 JP. For those who desire a great final boss for decks built around Carnage and Salvage and Horror, he is a great boss card. He also has the ability to remove any card in play by spending power equal to its play cost. So in other words, I could move my opponent's Freddy by paying 60% power, or my opponent's Fredbear by paying 100% power. This makes him situationally either a better death coin or worse death coin depending on what you're removing. But in practice, the once per turn scaling of this and the general price it usually is, because you're normally using this on higher cost cards, it's actually not as nutty as it sounds. However, it's worth noting he is a really good counter to Animduke. Because he's an office card, Animduke can never attack him, and also because you're constantly losing cards via Animdude, he builds up power pretty quickly, and also he can use his removal effect to get rid of Animdude almost any time. The Misfit cards also have a dedicated customization card that allows them to keep revealing cards until you find a Misfit card, and then you can play it for its cost reduced by the number of revealed cards. So let's say I revealed 6 to find a Shadow Freddy, then I could play Shadow Freddy for free because minus 6. Also in FNaF 2, there's Endo02 who can kill himself or other Endos for 20% power. He's alright. He's another one who kind of either does his thing or takes a hit. He is sort of a niche way to do something similar to Backup Generator, where you can play him and then sort of stockpile the power in a way for next turn, where it's like, hey, I spent 30% this turn, so I would be able to have 20% combined with all of my other effects next turn. Wrapping up this first video, we have the MCI Kids, who are all free area cards who enable their archetype. The main 4 all share an effect. If you have their requisite characters, so Chica for Susie, Freddy for Gabriel, Foxy for Fritz, and Bonnie for Jeremy, and you start your turn with anything less than 30% power, then you are set to 30% power, effectively making it so your minimum power is no longer 10%, but 30%. Note, this is not giving you 20% power, it is making sure you have the minimum 30%. Each of the MCI Kids also has a feature where they can deactivate to support their archetype's main ability. Gabriel generates 10% power when a card on your side of the map gives you power in some form. So in other words, if you had normal Freddy in play, you will get an additional 10% on top of Freddy's. Susie deals 1 damage whenever you heal or do effect damage. Not only does this sort of weaponize normal Chica and Toy Chica, but it just boosts Withered Chica and Phantom Chica even further. Fritz makes it so when you place a counter on a card you control, you can draw 2 cards for every 2 counters already on it. Jeremy allows you to draw 1 card whenever you remove an opponent's card. And that's pretty much it for the main 4 MCI Kids, but there's also Cassie and Charlie as our other spirit characters. However, they're a little bit unique, as while they have the same concept where they give you power at the start of your turn, it's not quite the same like setting the 30% concept. Charlie adds 10% if you have less than 30% power. This means it's not a true new minimum, whereas it just makes however much power you got a little less bad. So in other words, if you were supposed to start your turn with 10%, you would start with 20%, and if you're supposed to start with 20%, you would start with 30%. This is intentionally a consequence to Charlie's overall playstyle just being stally and kind of hard to work around. I mean, you're taking 10% away from your opponent every turn with a main puppet, so there has to be some kind of repercussion for this on your end. However, Charlie's main effect is that she can kill herself off, depending on how many puppets and Charlies you have in your salvage. Add 1 music box counter to the puppet by doing that. Cassie, on the other hand, instead of being inferior to the main 4, has a direct 20% starting boost. And that's flat, no matter what power you started with. So let's say you started with 10%, you'd start with 30%. Started with 30%, you start with 50%. The only condition is that you have to have a Fredbear or Golden Freddy of any kind in your salvage. Yes, that includes Adventure Fredbear, which means by just killing off Adventure Fredbear, you can get that flat 20% consistently. Cassie can also kill himself at any time when you play a Golden Freddy to gain 30% power. which means in one turn, Cassidy could theoretically swing Golden Freddy's cost from 100% down to 50%. This makes Golden Freddy significantly more playable if you're willing to put in that initial investment in the 40% cost of Cassidy. This also makes Cassidy probably the strongest spirit card other than the big one. But we won't get to that character for a while. For now, Cassidy has a huge role in playing into the Golden Freddy deck and making that playstyle even work in the first place. Next time, we're going to be looking up on FNaF 3 proper and FNaF 4. FNaF 3 will introduce the Springtrap and William Afton archetypes, and FNaF 4 will introduce a lot of our staples like the Crying Child. But for now...